Over 10 years ago, I made a video called Existence, where I talked about what exists and doesn't exist. I also briefly talked about how money doesn't exist. To me, it was common sense, which is why I didn't go into absolute detail about it. I assumed that people would understand it. Now that I'm making reviews related to this topic, I realize that a lot of people don't understand what I mean when I say that money doesn't exist. Then again, that video only had around 1,000 views. My channel wasn't popular back then. Most of you have probably not seen it. After this video, you will absolutely understand what I mean when I say that money doesn't exist. Before we talk about money, let's talk about bartering. It's important to understand the whole picture. If I would have a lemon tree, then I would have an abundance of lemons. It's very likely that I would want to trade them for something else. I would go to my neighbor who has a mandarin tree. I would ask him if he wants to exchange the lemons for the mandarins. He would agree because he wants the acidity of the lemons. Maybe he feels sick sometimes. We exchange them, and this is what bartering is. We just exchange goods for other goods. You could also exchange goods for services. If your other neighbor didn't have any goods, then she could offer you a massage. You would be able to feel this massage physically because of her touch. You would be able to taste the mandarin. You can touch it, you can see it, you can smell it. It actually physically exists in this reality. It's very important to understand this. The value of the lemon is the lemon itself. It can be the acidity or whatever you want to get out of it. But the point is that the lemon doesn't have any external values attached to it. There's no ideas or beliefs attached to this lemon. It's not what defines the value of the lemon. The only reason you want the lemon is because of the lemon itself. The reason you want the mandarin is because of the sweetness. For example, you only want it because of what the mandarin has to offer. There's no ideas or beliefs attached to it. If there is anything such as natural trading, then this would be it, because you actually want something that you can sense in some way. Of course, if you would actually live in nature, then you would live with your family, you would share everything, and you would do everything for each other, which is why you wouldn't need any goods or services. This is more so something that you would do in societies. But the point here is that you actually want something that is real. It's very important because now we will go to this right here. This is as far away from bartering as you can get. If you're from Australia, then you probably recognize this. And that is because since you were a child, you were taught that this is money. Interestingly enough, this is not actually money, because money does not exist. If you're from the US, maybe you don't recognize it. If you're from China, you don't recognize it. Maybe you were exposed to it sometime, maybe you looked it up, but the reason Australians recognize this is because they learned that this is what you can use in Australia to exchange it for goods and services. In school, you learned language. These are the lines here. It's just some lines written on it. This is not even paper. It's some kind of plastic. You can't even use it to start a fire, most likely. Could you even use it to wipe your ass? It's just absolutely pointless. There's just no meaning to it whatsoever. You read these lines. Oh, you read, it says Australia. Okay. Then you read this here. This line and this one, that's a 1, that's a 0. In reality, that's nothing. It's just some lines. But you were taught to read it as 1 and 0, and this is 2 and 0. This for you has more worth than this, not because it actually has. Both of these are completely worthless, but you were taught that 10 is lower than 20, even though it could be the other way around, and this could actually be a million. It's whatever you believe it is, because naturally it has no worth whatsoever. You, as an Australian, of course, believe that it does have worth. And the reason you do is because you can actually go to a store, give it to somebody, even though it's useless and worthless, and they will give you something in return which actually has worth, such as food. And this is why we believe in this. This is why we see this as money. Money is in your head. This is not money. You can only believe in money. A great example of this is if somebody would come out of the forest right now. This human being lived in the forest all of his life. Let's say that we speak the same language, even though that's impossible. He would probably not speak a language, just for the argument. He comes to me. He has a bow in his hands. It's old. It's already breaking, but I just find it interesting. I want to buy it. I tell him, hey, I want to buy your bow. He doesn't even understand what I'm talking about. Here, I'm giving you 20 Australian dollars. That's a lot for that almost broken bow. He looks at the bow and then he looks at this. What is this? He doesn't understand. Some human being on there. It's just a drawing. That's not worth my bow. I spent a lot of time creating the bow. This is not worth my bow. Why are you giving it to me? Is this a joke? He would be thinking that I'm joking because a natural human being doesn't understand what this is, because a natural human being hasn't been taught what this is supposed to be. He would just laugh at me, realize that you can't even start a fire with it because it's just kind of plasticky, and he would go away. He would not give me his almost broken bow because he would see more worth in the bow. It doesn't matter if it's man-made. Something man-made can also have worth. Weapons can have a worth. It doesn't matter if it's natural or man-made. A slave most definitely will believe that it does exist because he will believe that this is actually money, whereas the human being from nature doesn't see it as money, and that's because it isn't. You have to be taught that it is money. You have to believe that this is money. If you don't believe that this is money, then it has no worth automatically, which is why I said even if you're from the US, you may not understand that this is supposed to be Australian money, which is why you wouldn't see any worth in it until you look it up. He would, of course, never do that, never be able to, wouldn't care about it, and would move on with his life. He would never accept it because he would not understand what this worth is supposed to be. He would not be able to do anything with it in his natural life, and that's the huge difference between exchanging goods and exchanging so-called money, any kind of currencies, because if you're not taught that they have worth, then they just have no worth. But 99.99% of people on this earth believe that these worthless pieces of paper, plastic, and whatever actually have worth, and this is why most people go along with it, and this is the same reason I go along with it. A lot of people confuse my message in the videos. When I say that money doesn't exist, it's not me saying that it's useless or worthless. I can realize that money doesn't exist, but still go along with the idea and exchange it for any kind of goods or services that I want. It's actually incredibly useful. Realizing that it doesn't exist doesn't mean that it's useless. You can go along with it. You can give this to people and they will give you actual, real physical goods with worth. This is why I use it. It's irrelevant that it doesn't actually exist. I don't believe that this is money because I realize that it isn't, but I go along with it. I have these numbers on my bank account. This is why I have asked for financial help in the past also. It's very useful. I've never said in any way in my videos that it's not useful. What I talk about is if you base your life on it and you say that you need to create a business because you need to get rich, and being rich in itself, this paper, for example, in itself is what's going to make you happy. No, it doesn't give you anything. If I would have $1 billion in front of me right now in cash, then that in itself is just nothing. I can't do anything with it. But in the slave system, I can absolutely exchange it for something else. And that's what people are always looking forward to. They think about what they can get out of it. And when Andrew Tate talks about the matrix, and then he says that you can escape from the matrix by getting rich, then it's absolute bullshit. And I have to point out that money doesn't exist because the money itself is just in your head. And when you actually believe that money exists and you follow this belief in your head and you believe that you're getting out of the matrix if you buy some house, land, or a car, when in reality you're exchanging nothing for these meaningless objects, items, whatever. Even if it's land with animals, you still bought it in the matrix. You're still living in the matrix. That's not a natural life. A natural life is you living completely free, and there's no money, ideas, nothing like that involved. You're living completely naturally. You don't follow anything that's not even tangible in any way. You don't go along with that. That's not a natural life. That's still a slave life. You're completely in the matrix and in slavery, and that's why I have to point out in my videos that money doesn't exist. That has never meant that it's in some way useless. It has actually helped me a lot in my life. I go along with this belief. I just realize that this in itself is nothing. The bottom line is that money is an idea. It is not like these goods. These goods have their actual physical real worth. This has no worth. This is just paper with meaningless symbols on it, and we believe that it's money, and that's why we see it as money. Something that you believe cannot exist, and that's simply because if our thoughts, ideas would exist, then how would this reality look like? It would be crazy. Our thoughts would be flying around in actual physical reality. Another very easy way to tell that money doesn't exist is that something that exists is what it is. The sun is the sun, and I cannot look at the clouds or the trees and say, that's the sun. No, the sun is the sun. We gave this man-made word for the sun, but you with your natural senses can sense the sun, and you would never think that the sun is something else. The tree is the tree. This rock is a rock, and it is nothing else. I cannot point at the grass and say that's also a rock. It cannot be two things. The language wouldn't even make any sense, which is why you can easily tell that money doesn't exist, because this is supposed to be money. You believe that this is money, and then you go to your bank account, and all of a sudden those numbers, just some symbols in the bank account, is also money all of a sudden. How can it be two things at once? That alone doesn't make any sense. And soon it will be on the RFID chip, and that will also supposedly be money, and maybe in the future even something else. It will just always be whatever you believe it is supposed to be, but you will never be able to touch it, sense it in any way, smell it. It just doesn't exist. Your thoughts just cannot exist. If ideas and thoughts would exist, then I could say that this is the sun, or that this is an elephant. It would be insane. This is nothing, but we attach value to it, which is what money is. And this value is something that you cannot sense with any of your senses, which is why it doesn't exist. The reason they created the system is to enslave us. They can add as many zeros to their bank accounts as they want. That's how easy it is. And we are the ones who work for it. We commit crimes for it. We rob banks. We kill other people for it. It's absolute insanity for something that doesn't actually exist. For this, which is useless, but we kill for the value that we attach to this and for the goods that we can get then in return. I understand that, but to go as far as committing all of this crazy stuff for something that doesn't exist, somebody really has to talk about money and how it doesn't exist. It is incredibly important.